Started out on a one-way train. Always knew where I was gonna go next. Didn't know until.
Welcome to Pull and Perseverance, the podcast that explores all things pharmacy. We often see medication as just a prescription, a chemical solution to a biological problem. But behind every pill is a person, a story, and a journey of perseverance. To help us unpack the science and soul behind this, we are joined today by Sophia Weinberg. Sophia is a brilliant medical writer who specializes in translating complex health information into stories that empower and educate. She's here to bridge the gap between clinicians' textbook and the patient's lived experience. Thank you for listening.
Hi, Sophie. Welcome to Pull and Perseverance, and thank you for being my guest this afternoon. How are you doing?
Hi, Benny. Good. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be able to chat with you today.
I'm really excited to have you, and I really appreciate the time you've taken out of your very busy schedule. Medical writing, such a niche space in pharmacy. So tell me, how did you maneuver your career from a pharmacist to becoming a medical writer? How did that happen?
It's a great question with a disappointing answer, which is just by chance. To be honest, I had a long, very fruitful career in various roles in pharmacy for about a decade. And I think in my previous role, I was just looking for a change. And this role came up on LinkedIn of medical writing, and it sounded really fun. It sounded dynamic and creative, and it had the science aspect, which I was always, attracted to and always, I think, put at the forefront of whatever career choices I made. And I applied and managed to get it, and it wasn't, I would say, an intentional thing because I think like a lot of people in South Africa didn't know what medical writing was. So I just shot for it and I've ended up falling in love with it and couldn't think of doing anything else.
That's amazing. Um, you say that you took a shot, right, at the application. I do see a lot of I see a lot of jobs advertised for medical writing on LinkedIn, quite often actually. So so when you took that brave decision to go into medical writing, what type of research did you do before you actually got into the interview?
Well, I obviously Googled the company first, and I then did Google. So I think the thing with medical writing is it's a very established industry in the Northern Hemisphere, in Europe and Asia and the US. It just never really got to South Africa, I think, mostly because we don't have too many innovative pharmaceutical companies and biotechs that play in a global space. So we do obviously have companies that work here and generic companies as well, but they don't really have the need for medical writers because they get a lot of their directive from their headquarters and their global offices. Which is why I think it was never really an industry in this country. So there is a lot of information available online about what a medical writer is and what you can do with it and the kind of skills that you need for it. And I suppose with a simple Google and figuring out what my company does and visiting their website. And I think the one thing that also really helped was I reached out to people that were working at the company on LinkedIn. And I said, I've got this interview. I really want to find out more about what you do and how I can prepare. And that was really, really helpful, I think.
Okay. That sounds great. So what does a medical writer do?
I love this question because my answer is different every single day. So I would say at the core of it, and I think how I always explain it to people is you basically acting like a translator and translating science into English. I say English, I work in English, but into whichever language. Because science can be very overwhelming for a lot of people, especially if they don't understand science. Numbers and data can become completely meaningless if you don't present it in a way that is impactful and that makes sense to whoever it is that you're presenting it to. And that's, I would say, at the core of it is what medical writing is. And that comes in lots of different forms. You can obviously have the more data-orientated publications type, which is writing manuscripts and abstracts and posters for congresses. Then you have the more events-based, medical affairs-based kind of writing, which is more what I do, doing things like symposia at conferences, advisory boards, virtual meetings and things like that. Trying to think what else there is. But
Wow.
yeah, it's very, very broad. You can work digitally, you can work in person, you can touch a lot of aspects of healthcare.
Yeah, it sounds like a very dynamic space to be in because it sounds changing, like it changes every day, depending on
Yes.
what the requirement is. So if I understand you correctly, there are different areas that you could work in as a medical writer where you could go the scientific route,
Mhm.
where you would write a paper or do a publication, as you said, or make it a very scientific representation of a research study, for example, which
Mhm.
academics do all the time. And then you have the alternative or the option of working in a space where you would translate information that is scientific to make it easier for people to understand who don't necessarily have that scientific knowledge or the ability to read a scientific journal. Am I right in summing that up?
Yes, yeah. And I mean, in terms of the audience and whoever is receiving that information, it completely depends because the way that you engage with a patient is different to the way that you engage with a pharmacist, a retail pharmacist, a hospital pharmacist.
Mm,
Same with, say, different kinds of doctors. The way that you want to present data on your new drug or your new device is different compared with a GP, a very experienced cardiologist. So the skill and the nuance, I think, comes in tailoring that communication so that it is impactful, so that whoever sees it actually walks away with it and says, huh, okay, that was really interesting. I'm
mm,
going to take that forward with me in my medical practice. Or if you're a patient, maybe it can invoke some kind of lifestyle change or, you know.
mm. Okay, so you would be exposed to a particular drug depending on the company that you work for and the contracts that they receive, and they would expose you to that drug. So say for instance, there's a new drug on anti-smoking, just as an example. So then you would be given that contract to be able to almost bring it into a more simplified way depending on your audience. Am I right in saying that?
If that's something that they would like to do, for sure.
Okay.
But often, and I could be very wrong about this, so I hope that I'm not wrong and embarrassing myself here. But often I think most companies, if they don't already, they should have budgets planned for this kind of marketing and communications.
Mm,
Because absolutely you could want to maybe engage patients a bit more, in which case you want to translate all of that into something that's quite
mm,
simple. You might also be a new player in a certain therapy. So let's say, we've never worked in anti-smoking before.
mm,
And we want to establish ourselves as a company in anti-smoking. And that can involve a lot of different steps, like making a presence at congresses, maybe
mm,
sponsoring a something and
mm,
hosting all of these events to establish yourself as a player in that field. um, so it really does depend, and a lot of the time, especially when we work with smaller biotech companies, they don't know that. They don't
mm.
know that they need to go to a congress. They don't know that they can even hold this kind of event. They don't know that they can engage patients in this way. And I think that's where a lot of the value of medical writing comes from, is
Mm.
that we're able to advise them on the best ways to get their company known, get their product known, and get the science known as well.
Sounds really fascinating, Sophie. Sounds like a really exciting job.
It's very
Um,
fun. It's
it
it's and I
is,
think that was
yeah.
why I,
Sounds.
I at this stage can't imagine myself doing much more else, because it tickles me in all the right ways. It's different parts of my brain, and as I
I
said,
like
no two
that.
days are the same, which are really, really
Yeah,
nice.
yeah, definitely. It's not mundane at all. So do you think or should I ask, instead, is that what skills do you think you've learned in your career to be able to master this job that because I mean, you moved to senior marketing or senior medical writer pretty quickly from when I followed your career. So how did you get it right? What skills do you think you had or you need to have?
Good question. I think coming from my pharmacy background, definitely having the attention to detail is really, really important, but also I think understanding systems. I think being a pharmacist, you kind of are always on top of a whole bunch of different things, checking side effects, dealing with the insurance, like speaking to, reassuring the patients, making sure the stock is all there. So there's always a whole bunch of different things on your mind. And I think having trained that way as a pharmacist, first in retail, then in hospital. I also spent a really long time in managed care, about 5 years, I think. And all of those things have really just taught me to be able to link things together really quickly and do it with that level of attention to detail. So we don't mess up any of the data. And I think that sort of combined with understanding how to speak medical jargon and language and knowing what gastrointestinal means, or I'd say it was easier as somebody with a healthcare background like a pharmacist to be able to integrate into that.
Mm. So staying on that, do you think there is an advantage to being a pharmacist, and getting into medical writing or not? Do you think we are preferred?
It's a little bit difficult to say, and maybe so I think it's a lot of the people I work with are not pharmacists. A lot of them have a background in healthcare, with master's degrees and PhDs on top of that, and very fancy sounding stuff like nanomedicine and
Mhm.
molecular physiotherapy. I don't know, like all this very, very fancy sounding stuff. But I would say the key thing, and they don't use it, if they were experts in nanomedicine, chances are they're probably not working with nanomedicine as a
Mm,
medical writer, but the ability to have critical thinking and the
mm,
ability to be able to understand statistics, confidence intervals. I think from my pharmacy degree, what I think specifically would be the most key was, I don't know if you guys still do it, a module on evidence-based medicine. I
mm.
think it was Jackie Mio used to teach it. That 6 months, it was just half a semester,
Yes.
was probably the most impactful module for me, and something that to this day I use every single day in my work.
That's wonderful. So yeah, staying on that, and I think having a postgraduate degree allows you to translate skills that you learn in a PG or even in your undergrad. Do you
Mm.
think having a postgraduate degree gives you an advantage to a position like this?
Yes, I would definitely say so, for two reasons. Firstly, I think that my undergraduate education prepared me much more for a practical pharmacist role, retail pharmacy, hospital pharmacy, and really gave that clinical background and understanding, which is, of course, absolutely
Mm,
valuable. But where I think I really learned about the nuance in data, how to read data and how to interpret it was during my master's degree. And I think that it's not a criticism against, the pharmacy degree, because I think all undergraduate degrees are like that. They kind of
mm,
give you the practical skills first. And if
yeah.
you want to get into the nitty-gritty, that's what the postgraduate studies are for.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's definitely helpful to do that. And unless you are the type of person, I think that is motivated to go out and self-teach
Mm,
yourself, how to read a scientific article, what
yeah.
everything means, how to conduct good methodology, how to know if a clinical trial is a bit dodgy, or the data is a bit dodgy, because there is a lot of dodgy data out there.
Mm.
And I think those skills you'll only really be able to pick up in a postgraduate setting.
Thank you. Because I also would think, from based on what you're saying, it sounds like having those skills, that the analytical thinking that comes with a postgraduate degree would hold you in good stance, to getting into a sector like this.
Yeah.
Um, so what would your typical day be like? And firstly, from what my understanding is, it's mainly a remote job, am I right? Before we go on to my next question. So you
That's
work
right.
remotely. You
Yes,
work remotely.
I work remotely. We do have offices in South Africa. We go to they're kind of like WeWork spaces, like commune working places. We do have other offices around the world in London and in the US, where I think people are a lot more social and more wanting to come into the office, but it's completely remotely. Depending on the kind of work you do, and I'm very fortunate, but there's a bit of travel involved as well. So, I get to travel around the world, so I'm meeting clients and doing events, which is for me one of the biggest perks of the job. I love it very much. But yes, I'm currently in my house. I've got always surrounded by some sleeping animals. So it's the perfect work environment for me.
Wonderful. Very appealing for a woman.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
mm. So yeah, what would your typical day be like? So say you get a client who's asking for uh, to plan an event on an anti-aging drug.
Hmm.
How would your day go?
Well, firstly, we always have to walk the dogs first things. So yeah, yeah, it is. I walk the dogs. I come back. In terms of the steps towards planning an event, the first thing is to always touch base with the client. So obviously, I'm in South Africa. Most of our clients are in Europe. So everything is done via Teams, really, and by everything that Teams has to offer. To be honest, the SharePoints and all of that. But we touch base with them and kind of try and figure out what they want. They can tell us, and we always prefer to do it in person or I guess face to face like this, because it's always difficult for people to explain themselves well over an
Mm,
email.
mm,
So we always like to have that contact and ask them, what is it that you actually want? And we have the skills and experience to be able to say, yes, this is feasible. No, this is not feasible. And usually we take it back. Then after the call, we make a plan. And then a couple of weeks later, we'll set up another call and say, this is what we've put together. Are you happy with this? Um, and they'll say yes or no, and we refine it further if we need to. And then it completely depends. If the project is, say, working at a congress and wanting to do a big presentation at a big fancy congress, normally they would want really famous, I call them celebrity doctors. They're the ones that are at the forefront of research in the
mm,
field. And they're usually the ones that are on like 17 different boards and
mm.
departments of, heads of all these different departments. Um, and they usually come with their own content. They have some piece of research that they
Right.
want to present.
Mm,
So our role as medical writers is we make sure that it makes sense. You can't just put random words on bulleted words on a slide and expect an audience to understand that. So we
mm,
make sure that it's got a good flow, it comes across really well. And the other valuable or the where we add value is in data checks. So we make sure that the data is all correct. Um, and we make sure that the people that are sitting at the front of the room can see all the slides as well as the people that are sitting at the back of the room.
mm,
If there's other types of events where, say, the clients don't know what content they want, they can come to us and be like, Sophie, we want to talk about anti-aging. We want to present to pharmacists. We want to give them a bit of a background in the biology of aging. We then want to tell them why our product is so innovative and so amazing. And we want to finish off by presenting the positive results of our trials. We take that back and we can make a really beautiful, fancy
mm.
presentation for that. So, yeah, I suppose it all depends. And of course, once all of that has been finalized, we do the delivery as well. So we'll be on site at the Congress or at the meeting, helping to deliver those content presentations.
So you're literally at the forefront of whatever you're doing. It's not just developing material, but it's also actually being part of the presentation of that material.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's what is so nice about this role, I think, and what is so
Mm,
fulfilling about it is I really get to feel like I'm part of something bigger than myself. A lot of
mm,
what we do, it helps to shape the future of healthcare, well, the present and the future of healthcare by getting the most cutting edge innovative research to the people that will use it the most and to the decision makers that will use it for the good. And that for me is very fulfilling.
I agree. I mean, we all want a meaningful job, eh? That makes a difference.
Sure.
So that's wonderful. So in terms of, you mentioned evidence-based research, do you do you use that a lot? Is it a core skill in your role? And how does one who's never had exposure to that, how does one obtain that? What advice would you give?
So your first question, yes, it is definitely very core, and I use it not only every day, but multiple times a day. I think it's the skill in being able to read a piece of research or a piece of information and being able to make the call. Is this valid? Is this clinically relevant? Has this followed good methodology? Because we all know that there can be bad science and um, there's the skills and the knowledge that you get by understanding evidence-based medicine will help you make those decisions. Um, in terms of getting skills and experience in evidence-based medicine, um, university is obviously a great place to start. And I hope that you guys are still doing the EBM module. But if say you're not at Wits University and doing this degree, or you're just interested in it, I think there are a lot of free resources online. You can obviously just go into YouTube and type in evidence-based medicine. I think the very famously Harvard and MIT and all of those guys released a whole bunch of courses for free. Udemy, there's definitely courses there. But there are also local companies in South Africa, and I'm trying to think of the name of the one that does it. But there are some providers in South Africa that offer short courses on evidence-based medicine in a formal setting. You do assignments and tests and things. But those are useful to upskill yourself.
Thank you. So in terms of medical writing and where it's moving towards, you've been in it for a few years now. Do you think that there's definitely room for evolving into something bigger? Where do you see it heading?
Um, I think so. I think it's a field that is constantly evolving, because we deal a lot in communications and with things like social media and now AI, the way that we're communicating and the different ways that we can communicate data are evolving and changing. So I think there are more and more companies that are wanting medical writers. Um, as I mean, I really can't say too much about the history of medical writing. It is, as I said, it wasn't so, isn't so big in South Africa. But I think from a South African perspective, a lot of the anybody can use it. The generic companies, the small biotechs that are developing these innovative ways to deliver HIV drugs, they're absolutely amazing. And I think, you get these scientists that are sitting in labs for years developing these amazing products, these amazing drugs, and then they have no idea how to get them to the market. How do you tell some, with the greatest love in my heart, I'm using this term, but some nerd in a lab how to successfully market a commercial strategy. There's that disconnect. But that's where medical writers can come in at any stage of the drug development process. We assist in getting to the next stage without you needing to completely upskill yourself and be a CEO, a CFO, having all of these skills.
So it sounds like creativity is also a really core area of your job. So would you say that that's something that's really important, that you need to have creativity in your blood in order to do this job?
Yes and no. I would say that creativity is definitely something that I always struggled with and still struggle with. I just very much believed I was science through and through, and that was it. And I was not creative at all. And it was something I actually really struggled with getting into this job was I now had to be creative. I was forced to be creative, and I would be in a flat panic, being like, I don't know how to do this. But it is something that develops over time, and what it means to be creative is also different depending on the context. So if you would like to work in publications, writing manuscripts, you can still be creative in the way that you put a sentence together,
Mm.
or in the flow of your words and in the story that you're telling. If you are making presentations or patient pamphlets, you can practice your creativity in a different way by using bright colors and different sized fonts and things that really make the data pop. So it really, really depends. I think what helped me in particular was a lot with my MBA, because I did a course on marketing and branding. And that was really interesting in terms of learning the psychology of marketing and what engages people and
Mm.
strikes out to people. So I'd be lying if I said I didn't use a lot of the things that I learned there in being creative in my role now.
That's interesting. The psychology of marketing must have been
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah. Well, I
I would
mean,
imagine what colors to use and shapes to use
yeah.
based on which audience you're targeting. That's interesting. So
Yeah.
staying on skills, does the medical writing company or wherever you may work, irrespective of the company you're working at, do they expose you to further learning courses to improve your skills? So is that part of the working experience?
Yes, it definitely is. And I'm very privileged to work at a really wonderful company that does encourage that. Um, if you work more in publications, they encourage you to get I can't remember what it's called now, but it's a medical publication certification. Basically, it says that you understand methodologies and good clinical practice,
Mm.
and you know how to, even though they're just numbers, you know how to report them correctly. So that one, I know that a lot of my colleagues are busy getting. I was told not to do it because I don't work in publications so much. So that's fine. I think I'm done studying for a little bit anyway, so it's not a train smash. But yes, I think definitely if there was anything else that, I had to come across or anything I had an interest in doing, I'm sure that that would be encouraged as well.
That's great. So there's constant upskilling depending
Absolutely.
on what job you're doing. So
Absolutely.
in terms of advice to young pharmacist graduates or even somebody who is wanting to move careers to something to what you're doing, what advice would you give them?
That is also a good question. I think I have two pieces of advice. The first one is networking. Um, a lot of companies, including my own, are always hiring and always posting roles on LinkedIn. And I think if you reach out to people that are working at that company and saying, "Hey, I saw the posting. What are you doing? I want to find out a bit more. Can you tell me?"
Mm.
10 times out of 10 people are willing to share their story and their experience. But I think number two is just do the thing. Don't be afraid and say, oh, well, this is so different to what I'm used to, or this is so different from what I studied, or just try, throw your hat in the ring, go and do something different, meet some different people, learn from people that are not pharmacists, even in completely different fields like IT or finance or whatever, because you'll be surprised, number one, how much overlap there is, but number
Mm.
two, I think it expands the way that you think about the world.
Mm.
And it allows you to use your skills and to grow your skills in many different ways outside of the traditional boundaries.
So staying on that and networking and being aware of what's happening globally, is that important to your job? So, because you're South African, you have a South African degree, and regulations and legislation is very different to what's happening in Europe. It
Mm.
sounds like that's where your main clientele comes from. So, is that an important space to be aware of what's happening in the European market to be able to do this job?
Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, I think unfortunately my exposure to the South African market is zero. And it's vital to have an understanding of what's happening, particularly from a regulatory perspective. I think in Europe and in the US is where obviously the FDA and the EMA are sitting, and they are the top regulatory decision makers in the world. And so they have very nuanced and very uh, a very tricky legislation and regulation around drugs in particular. So it is absolutely vital to stay and like in touch with what's happening there. Otherwise, you can't really do your job, and you can get yourself and your clients into a lot of regulatory trouble without doing that. But it's also, I like, for me, I find it quite interesting as well because I like to see what's going on there and seeing how that translates in the South African context. And always having these thoughts like, oh, well, that was really cool. Maybe if we did this and this and this in South Africa, it would work quite well. And you can learn a lot of lessons because I think their infrastructure for handling their healthcare systems is a lot more developed and advanced than ours is at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. They have much more resources
Yeah.
available compared to us. But I think the core aspects of the way they apply the knowledge that they have and the skills that they have, we could learn from them for sure. No doubt about
Mm,
it.
mm.
But staying on that, how do you do that? How do you make sure you keep up to date with all of these different regulatory bodies? Because there's quite a lot of information to keep up to date with all the time. So how
Yeah.
do you do that?
There's two ways. The first is, again, my amazing company that have mandatory trainings and keep sending me weekly reminders when I'm overdue with them. But they're really good at putting that together and making sure anybody that works for them is up to date with the latest. Um, Secondly, I think your phones and our computers are pretty good at picking up on algorithms and stuff. So when
Mm,
I'm reading the news, I get bits and pieces.
yeah.
But thirdly, it's you do actively, the same way that pharmacists will do CPDs. It's up to me to make sure that I stay up to date with all of it.
So keeping current is really important for your job.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, in terms of medical writing and what the general public perception is, do you think there's any misperceptions and that you'd like to maybe iron out for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think people probably think it's a pretty boring job. I think they hear medical writing and they kind of think it's like research and numbers and data sets and like very, very bland. And I just want to unequivocally say that it is so exciting and so filled with adrenaline. And
Mm.
um, of course, we mentioned the creativity, and I think that's something that's really like also something that's quite fulfilling to put into practice. But yeah, it is actually a very exciting job, even though we have to deal with research and numbers and data.
Yeah, you got the fun side of research. I'm actually
So,
jealous. But because, I mean, to be honest, you're right. When I first looked at medical writing, that's exactly what I thought. I thought it's really boring, and I thought it can't be really fun. It must be just sitting and reading all the time. But it's, yeah,
mm,
thank you for sharing your angle to it because I didn't realize that that's what you do. I appreciate that. So, give me top 5 skills that you think you have to have, or you should have as a
the
medical
medical
writer.
writing. Number one would probably be critical thinking. Number two would be problem solving. Number three would be storytelling. Number four would be I don't think it's so critical, but I think it's something that's definitely helped me is having good people skills and being able
Mm.
to speak to different types of people and different types of clients and different personalities, which, by the way, I think is a skill that I think you develop as a pharmacist,
Mm.
working with the public
Exactly.
and doctors and medical aides
Yeah.
and stuff. But that was four. And then the fifth one, I think, is probably good time management.
Mm.
I think obviously depending on your role, but you could be juggling lots of different things. You've still got your kids at home, the dogs need a walk, you haven't gone grocery shopping. And for me, what I struggle with is because it's such a fun job, I can get really sucked into it and get up from my desk a few hours later and it's already nighttime. So I think just to make sure that you keep on top of that is important.
Thank you. I love that. It sounds like you really enjoy your job.
I do.
Um, from a language perspective, Sophia, do you think you need to learn a different language or know a different language for a job like this?
No, absolutely not. I think one of the reasons why my company in particular hires from South Africa is because we have a really good level of English. So, I mean, obviously, if you don't speak language as your first language, English would be great. But I think if you are at university level and making it through, you'll be absolutely fine. We have a number of colleagues from different countries around the world where their first language is not English. And we have a large portion of our South African cohort whose first language is not English. And I think, again, that's probably where the postgraduate experience comes into play because I wouldn't even say it's your conversational English that matters so much, but just the science English, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Um,
no, no, I know
and
what you mean.
and that you can do even if English is not your first language.
Thank you. So something very personal, and if you don't want to answer, it's okay. Ballpark figure in terms of salary, where are we looking at for people in medical writing?
An annual salary, I think, yeah, so again, it depends because there's a whole bunch of different roles that you can go into, but I think it would probably be on par with a sort of more mid to senior level retail pharmacist or hospital pharmacist. I haven't gotten more senior yet, but as I do, I will let you know what that salary band looks like. But I imagine sort of moving all the way up to senior levels, particularly being in a global company, I think that salary is probably relatively attractive.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. So any final concluding remarks for all our listeners, Sophia? Anything you'd like to impart with?
Yeah, so I think I'm a huge proponent of medical writing and medical communications. And I think if you are the type of person that enjoys the science but is feeling maybe like working in your typical patient environment is not quite for you, if you may be interested in academia but are also feeling maybe a life in academia and university is not for you, please do consider medical writing. Um, we are always doing outreach drives at universities. We are always posting information on LinkedIn, roles that are available. Please feel free to reach out to me or any of my colleagues if you want to ask any questions. We're always happy to support. And yeah, just do a Google, see what it's about. And yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So can I say on this platform that they could reach out to you on LinkedIn? Would you
Yeah,
be happy with that?
absolutely. With the biggest of
Great.
pleasure,
Thank
that's fine.
you. Thank
I'm
you. Thank
always
you so
happy to help
much.
and I love helping people sort of find their little role and so I do hope that somebody does reach out to me.
Ah, that's awesome. Thank you, Sophia. Thank you so much for being a guest on Pull and Perseverance.
You're so
Um,
welcome. Thank
I
you for
really
having me.
enjoyed it. Thank you.
Speaking with Sophia Weinberg was genuinely inspiring. Her expertise and knowledge in medical writing aren't just impressive, they're captivating. You could absolutely hear the spark in her voice, that undeniable passion for a role that so beautifully blends the analytical mind of a pharmacist with the creativity of a storyteller. She reminded us that for pharmacists, medical writing is such a refreshing path. It's a role that stretches your thinking beyond the purely clinical into creativity, project management, and forging clearer communication between healthcare professionals and patients. It's about making the complex accessible, and that is a profound form of care in itself. If Sophia's passion ignited something in you, if you found a new perspective here today, please follow or subscribe to Pull and Perseverance wherever you get your podcasts. Share this with a pharmacist, a writer, or anyone who needs to hear that their career can have the same spark. Thank you, Sophia, for sharing your light with us. And thank you for listening. Remember, perseverance isn't just about enduring, it's about finding the path that sets your mind on fire. Until the next time, stay motivated. Thank you for listening.